Hi, my name's Brittany Irwin, and today I'll be talking to you about the 6 assumptions of andragogy and how I use them to create my video lesson. My video lesson, just for a little context, is centered on helping managers develop an onboarding framework utilizing the National Academic Advising Association's 3 core competencies. The first assumption of andragogy is the learner's need to know. And what this refers to is making sure that your learner understands why it's important for them to learn the information that you'll be sharing, and in other words, why should they care about that information. In my learning video, I endeavor to do this right away. In the opening section where I am on camera, I explicitly address that even though managers may not have any experience in creating onboarding programs, that typically they are the person who will be tasked with creating that onboarding. After all, in most organizations, whether or not they're in higher education, we are all tasked with doing more with less. And I say that very clearly early on in the video so learners know why they will need to know all of the information that we'll be covering together. Assumption 2, self-concept of the learner, is all about learners taking increasing ownership over their learning through self-directed activities and exploration. In my video, I strive to do this very intentionally with the activities that I created for the learners. In Activity 1, they are asked to define what competency means and why a competency-based approach to onboarding is appropriate for them. In Activity 2, they tap into their own experience and expertise and their newfound knowledge of the 3 competencies to develop information and knowledge that are specific and appropriate to each of the 3 competency areas for onboarding. And in the third activity, they increase their knowledge of those 2 prior activities by looking at their list and thinking about a competency-based approach to begin developing an outline as a framework for instigating their own onboarding programs for their new hires. Assumption 3, prior experience of the learner, encourages educators to help root the learning in learners' lived experience, which validates their expertise that they are bringing into the learning situation already. I open my video by explicitly addressing why they, as managers with years of experience and expertise in their profession, are uniquely situated to deliver an onboarding experience to new hires. I then, in each learning activity, ask them to call upon all of those experiences and integrate them into the new knowledge that we've learned about the 3 competency areas. Assumption 4 is readiness to learn. And for this assumption, as educators, it is telling us that we need to prime our students with the foundational knowledge that they will need in order to take increasing ownership of their learning. In my video, I achieved this by laying out exactly what I mean by competency-based onboarding right from the first activity, where I show a YouTube video and ask them to define that concept for themselves. I further do this by then spending the first third of the video laying out the tenets of each of the 3 core competencies and make it clear that the competencies are rooted in a professional organization and that even if they are not a member of that profession, higher education, that the concepts can still apply to them and their field. Assumption 5, orientation to learning, is all about making sure that the learning that we are imparting is relevant to our learners' lives and they understand the need to know why do they need to know this information now. In my video, in the opening introduction, as well as through the various learning activities, I make clear that as the manager managing these employees, it will ultimately be up to them not only to create the onboarding experience, but they will be the individuals responsible for managing these folks. So it is incumbent upon them to create a purposeful and impactful onboarding program that will result in a competent employee. Competent employees are much easier to manage than incompetent employees. Assumption 6, the motivation to learn, asks that educators make learners aware of the internal and external rewards of the learning that they'll be participating in. For my video, I addressed this early on in the introduction as well as the conclusion. I addressed the internal motivator as finally having a chance to leverage all of their years of experience and knowledge in the profession into a practical framework that will benefit others. The external motivator, again, is that ultimately as the manager, they will have to be responsible for creating the onboarding program, whether or not they use a competency-based approach. And if they do use a competency-based approach, they are more likely to end up with competent, skillful employees, and competent, skillful employees not only make them look better as managers within the organization, it also makes them easier to manage, thus making their job as a manager easier right from the beginning.